I'm not a forest ranger, but I used to be in a group that's somewhat like the Scouts. So, we'd spent a lot of time in the woods. We encountered many weird things, but most of the time it was easy to explain. One thing happened, though, that to this day scares the living hell out of me. I was a leader for the age group 8 to 10 years old, and we were out on a camping trip. It was the first year we stayed on that terrain, and it was huge. Normally, we tend to explore the majority of a terrain before the kids arrive, so we were aware of any possible dangerous spots to avoid. This time, it was impossible. Every camp, we have what we call a night game. It's usually a scary game in which the kids have to complete several tasks while the leaders scare the ever-loving heck out of them. Like always, we had one too during that camp. We masked up as monsters and hid out in the woods close to the checkpoints they had to pass. While running in between checkpoints, I found an open stretch of forest with little to no foliage, so it was ideal for chasing after them. There was no real room to hide besides behind trees, so I couldn't use my flashlight or they'd be able to see me from miles away. It was dark, like the unsettling kind of dark that plays tricks on your eyes, and you start imagining things that aren't real. During my stay there, I saw a shadow that was around my size running past me a few times. I couldn't see it very well, so I just assumed I was imagining things because nothing was there when I turned my flashlight on. The game was nearing its end, and I saw the shadow again. This time, I could see it vaguely standing near a tree, not too far away from me. I thought it was one of the other leaders hiding to scare kids, and decided to go over there as it was about time to go back. I aimed my flashlight toward the tree, and while I was getting closer, I noticed that there was indeed someone standing there. They were dressed in what looked like a torn burlap sack, and had their head covered with a few white plastic bags that looked like they were tied together. I started to feel pure dread. Something felt really off. I asked if everything was all right, but they didn't respond. The only thing I heard was this weird sound that sounded like someone knocking on wood. Nevertheless, I went a bit closer until I was about 15 feet away from this person. The knocking sound turned out to be that person smacking his head repeatedly into the tree, and I noticed he looked like a male. He was barefoot, and his arms and legs were covered with crusted mud. His hands were in a weird, cramped position. I was convinced this was just one of the other leaders pulling a prank, so I told them to knock it off. He slowly turned his head and started walking towards me. Something inside me just told me to run. It didn't matter if it was just a stupid prank, and I ran away scared for nothing. If this wasn't a prank, it felt like I was in serious danger, so I ran as fast as I could. I heard him running after me, but I didn't want to turn around to look as I'd probably run into a tree. I arrived back at the campsite, and every single person that could be dressed like that was already there. They couldn't have gotten there before me, and if they did, they sure as hell didn't have the time to change into their regular clothes. Still, I told them, and that they gave me a good scare with that. They just looked weird at me, thinking I was trying to scare them, and we left it at that. The next day, I wanted to go check it out. Maybe some weirdo ate the wrong mushroom and might be out there dying from hypothermia. I took someone else with me just in case, and there was nothing but endless trees. We arrived at the tree, where I saw the person banging his head, and there was a dead-skinned, decomposing rabbit nailed to the tree. The forest ranger and the cops arrived after we called them. They looked around quickly and brushed it off as just a prank from another scouting group or some kids from the nearby town and left it at that. We didn't notice anything weird after that, so it probably was a dumb prank. But seriously, some people have a messed up sense of humor. About 2 years back, my wife and I decided to go tent camping for 3 days at Cane Hollow Campground in Allegheny State Park, New York. Of course, there were signs of bears in that area, and all precautions should be taken while camping. We were very used to this, as we have camped in bear country before and have seen plenty in the wild from Michigan, Tennessee, and of course, New York. We made it through our first 2 days without any trouble camping near the back of the campgrounds. On the 3rd day, we were at our campsite, and we had a couple with a newborn baby camping 2 spots down from us. It was about 2 p.m. and the sun was fully out. The couple just put the baby to rest in the tent, and the father was getting something out of their bear box and headed towards their truck. Out of nowhere, a massive black bear charges into their campsite. Then it takes a large duffel bag out of the bear box and begins ripping it apart. The wife and husband saw this. The father ran to grab the child, and the mother ran into the truck and started slamming on the horn. This made the bear grab the duffel bag, run only like 20 feet away, and started to eat whatever was inside. I was standing on top of our picnic table watching this bear completely unafraid of any humans near it. The wife had also got on the phone and called park rangers to come to the campsite. 2 rangers came in a few minutes, one with a paintball gun and the other with a shotgun. At the same time, they rushed the bear. The ranger with the paintball gun was shooting the bear, and the man with the shotgun was shooting in the air. This is what it took to scare the bear for the first time. After that, the rangers told everyone it would be safe to stay, as the bear should now be afraid of the people there. My wife and I felt safe enough and stayed up until about 1 in the morning, just talking and still a little anxious to go to sleep because of what we saw. If you've been to the forest at night, you probably know that it's rarely truly quiet. That night, we heard squirrels and were aware of a family of raccoons watching us, checking to see if we had food by our fire. So, the sound of small twigs breaking was common. It was getting late, and we decided to sit out until the fire died. There was one small flame left when I felt something to my right. I quickly turned on the flashlight, and there, standing literally 5 feet away, was the largest black bear I had ever seen. It came in quickly, but it wasn't running. As soon as I turned on the light, it stopped, lowered its head, and began to growl. It showed its chattering teeth while doing the lip quiver thing bears do when they're angry. With its head lowered even more, it began to sway, staring at me and my wife. After looking into it, I believe this movement is a sign of aggression from a predator and not at all a defensive move. My wife and I immediately stood up from our chairs. I suspect the bear thought we were smaller than we were because after standing, it started to focus more on our tent than us. I put my wife behind me and pushed her to the car and put her in the passenger seat. She smacked her head pretty hard on the roof of the car and was dazed while I walked around the front of the car. I got in the driver's seat. We looked at each other and realized the car keys were on the picnic right next to the bear. The only thought going through my head was the only advantage I had on this thing was that I knew where it was. After taking a deep breath, I got out of the car. Luckily, I had a baseball bat and began to walk toward the bear, yelling. I was shouting at it to back up, loud enough that the whole campground could hear me. The bear, with its broad side facing me again, began to quiver its lips and growl again. I saw on its back right leg a huge chuck of hair missing. Under that, you could see its pale skin with what looked like bloody road rash. Also, for whatever reason, the bear was completely soaked, even though it had not rained for several days. Only God knows what happened to that bear before it came at us. For some reason, the bear turned and walked back into the forest. Without a doubt, I know that bear was not scared of me, not one bit. My wife, feeling a need to protect me, came out of the car still stunned by hitting her head. I love her for thinking she could protect me, but it definitely scared me that she got out at all. We both watched as the bear walked back into the forest. Compared to our campsite, it was just a wall of blackness you couldn't see into. I heard it pace back and forth a few feet away from where I could see it, and then things went silent again. I quickly grabbed the keys, and we drove about 5 miles until we had cell phone reception. I have no idea how the wife earlier made a call from her campsite. We told the park rangers that we had a bear problem, and they acted like we were overreacting. They sent a local cop to check things out. I told the officer what happened, how strange this bear was acting, and that it might be injured. He also acted like we were overreacting and searched our campsite without getting anywhere near the area I pointed the bear went off to. They said it looked good and there was nothing that would be drawing in a bear. They also said we probably scared it off again and it won't be back. It seemed to me and my wife that this was not true, and he was just trying to not get us to panic or anyone who overheard what happened. We packed up our whole campsite in about 10 minutes and planned to drive all the way home. It was about 3 a.m., and as we were leaving the site, we saw the campground filled with police vehicles. They were literally on every turn, and more were still entering the area. I think it's safe to say that the cops knew this was a serious problem. Maybe they stayed there the rest of the night, since most decided to park near people's campsites. To be honest, it felt like the bear wanted the element of surprise to attack us and was waiting in the woods a few feet away. Maybe it wanted the lights to go out first and for us to be asleep before it came in again. I'm glad we trusted our gut and got out of there. Also, if you were wondering, the campsite was mostly filled with people, and not even one person came to help, even though we went to help the other couple earlier before the rangers came. Luckily, no one was hurt, but this was an extremely close call. My family goes camping in Joshua Tree twice a year. This tradition has been going on for at least 60 years, and, in that whole time, my family has only ever left early on 2 occasions. The first was when it rained up in the mountains and caused 3 inches of flash flood to wash out our camp at 4 a.m. The second time was much more terrifying, and none of us have an answer as to what actually happened. I was 12 at the time. It's the first night of camping, and I was in the girls' tent with all my girl cousins. About 6 of my male cousins were 10 feet away from us in another tent. My parents are closer to the road, along with 3 sets of uncles and aunts. All in all, there are about 20 of us. Most of our tents are the kind you can zip open at the top to see the stars. I always love doing that because I'm a bad sleeper, and it gives me something to look at when everyone goes to sleep. At one point, I close my eyes, and I start to fall asleep when a small pebble from the humongous boulder next to our tent falls on top of the tent. I'm used to this because birds or squirrels often knock small debris around when they try to get at our food during the middle of the night. I open my eyes, and the first thing I see is someone who appears to be standing on top of the boulder. It's about 15 feet up in the air, looking down into our tents. The person seemed to be wearing tight clothing and was really skinny and oddly shaped. At first, I tell myself that it's one of my male cousins because they had been trying to scare us all night. But the person was moving really weirdly. Its head was moving back and forth like a cobra, and it kept crouching down on all 4s and crawling down the face of the rock closer to us. Then, it's crawling back up and pacing. At one point, it looked up at someone making noise at another campsite, and its eyes gleamed in the moonlight. I'm also entirely sure that it did not have the skull shape of a coyote or a mountain lion. It had a flat face with no snout. So I'm laying in my tent, freaking out and trying to rationalize what I'm looking at. A lot of time goes by, and this thing just continues to watch us and move its body in really strange ways. I think about screaming, but the thing keeps coming down the side of the rock, and I'm afraid it would jump onto our tents and kill us. After some time, I hear someone shouts, "Hey, what are you doing?" It's my uncle. Suddenly, at like 3 a.m., everyone is awake. My female cousins are awake and confused, and 2 of my older male cousins jump out of their tent with an axe. For a few seconds, the thing stays completely still, but then my aunt and several of my cousins see it, and they all scream. Someone finds a flashlight and they turn it on, but the thing jumps off the backside of the rock. A couple of seconds later, it runs and gallops out from behind the rock, past our campsite. My uncle managed to shine a light on it for a second, and I still don't have any idea what I saw. The thing definitely didn't have clothes on, but was naked and had a dark mark on its side that I mistook for spandex. We hear screaming and thrashing from another campsite, and several of the guys in our group go over and investigate. Whatever the thing was escaped into another campsite and ran into a small 2-person tent. When the forest rangers got there, it was 4 a.m., and everyone was confused. My uncle and the people at the other tent say that it was a naked person. I definitely don't think it's a person, and thankfully 2 of my adult male cousins had also spent some time watching it and being absolutely terrified by it, so they agreed with me. We give them all the details we could, and one ranger tells us that it was probably a coyote or mountain lion with mange. The other ranger looks really concerned, and I think he went off into the night to look for it. Either way, it was way too big for a coyote, and I've tracked mountain lions back in college, and know for sure mountain lions do not move like that, nor look like that when they have mange. We all left and went home that night. Either there was a naked crazy person, a monster, or a mountain lion with mange running around. Whatever it was, it had spent at least an hour watching us. We stayed in hotels for a couple of years after that, and I've camped there at least 20 more times since then. I've never heard or seen anything like it since. I'm glad that you're here with us today. Please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy a good scare. As always, thank you for watching and see you in the next video.